Hey, I'm Alan Firstenberg,
Hi, I'm Linda Lawton.
and welcome back to Two Voice Devs.
Two Eyes Devs.
Linda, always fantastic when you're able to be on the show. Good to have
Yep.
you.
You've been bugging me to do it for a month, 2 months. I've been busy, but we're here. We're gonna do it.
Well, and I've been bugging you because this has been a pretty cool feature that both
Yes.
of us have been playing with for a little bit.
Yes.
And we talked about some of it before, and now it's time to talk about more of it. I guess a couple of months back, we talked about using Google's Imagen model to create images,
Yes.
and that's always interesting and it's fun and it's a useful tool. But one of the things that I've really been waiting for has been the ability to not just create stuff, but to edit stuff. And this is
Yes.
an incredibly powerful tool that Google's letting us use. So let's talk a little bit about the Imagen 3 editing API and tool set.
Well, I think it's great that we have the ability to generate these images. I did a lot of art when I was younger. I used to paint and I used to draw, and I've always loved it. And I have worked with GIMP before, doing some artwork with mostly thumbnails from my YouTube videos. And like you, I started getting really, I mean, it's annoying making thumbnails for your YouTube videos.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found on early on was that I could upload my YouTube video to the official Gemini models, the big Gemini models, and then have it describe a thumbnail and then generate a thumbnail using Imagen, which I have actually been doing for months now, and it's working great.
Right. And and that's fine and that's interesting. And I do that for thumbnails as well. What the problem I keep running into when I do this though is I'll have it give me four possible thumbnails and I'll say, well, this one looks okay, except for the fact that it has this random wire running out of nowhere and the microphone is hovering in thin air. But other than that, it was great. It's a shame that it just did this part wrong. Or, it gives me a wristwatch, which I can't stand. Or it gives me a beard. And I'm like, come on. I told you no beard. So it's frustrating when it gives a pretty good image, but not a good enough image.
Yeah, but you got to remember the key point that I always tell everybody is never tell an AI not to do something. It's like a teenager. You
But
tell a teenager not to do something, they're gonna do it. So if you're telling it not to give you a beard, it's gonna give you a beard, Alan.
well, one of the nice things, though, about Imagen 3 is that it has, or at least used to have, the negative prompt, which was specifically designed to do that.
Did
And
that work very well for you?
most of the time, every so often, though, it would give me a beard.
Yeah, I never had that. You should have tried like clean shaven.
That's in the built-in prompt. It ignores it.
It didn't help. Oh
Yeah.
well. Yeah, well.
But now with the editing API, it's much better at letting me clean some of this stuff up. For people who have used, for example, Google Photos Magic Eraser, very, very similar. The big difference is that you now have that in an API, whereas Magic Eraser kind of hid it behind Google's
I've used
interface.
that in Canva because I use Canva a lot for my thumbnails and for my YouTube videos and for a lot of different things I use Canva for. And it had a great feature for being able to just like, remove small things. But whenever you tried to do something bigger, it would get confused. And I haven't really, I think that Imagen 3 is actually pretty good at it, don't you?
I found it pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's
Oh,
pretty
no.
good. So let's talk about that feature. But there are some other editing features that are also available, which we'll talk about, but we'll get to them. So let's talk first a bit about what you've been doing with these what they call in painting or infilling features. One of the cool things that you've been showing me, but not telling me how you did recently, was this really cool 3D printing thing, which you said you we're generating from using Imagen. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So I guess a little background. My husband gave me a 3D printer for Christmas. I've hinted for one for years, but he actually gave me one. With 3D printers, I mean, anybody who has a 3D printer knows that you can download files for 3D printers all over the internet. There's thousands of them. There's probably millions of them out there. But the thing is I wanted to create something original, something that was more me. So I started wondering whether or not you could use Imagen to generate a 3D model. Well, you can't really generate a 3D model, but you can generate an image and then have that image, you can turn it into a 3D model and then print it out.
Oh, that's pretty cool looking.
What I did was I started with, now I gave you I gave you like 6 files that I started with. And I basically told it, I think I got really simple. Create a cute heart, right? Because the reason I was doing this was because it was just before Valentine's Day, and Maker's World, which is Bamboo Studios, they had a contest going. You could, win something for generating it. So I was like, okay, fine. So, create a cute heart. And that's where it gave me that first image where it's kind of 3D puffy. Now, the thing is I can't turn that into a 3D model. So I tried to tune it a little bit, and I said, well, then it has to be like 2-dimensional, right? And not too much shading. And that's how I ended up getting into the other ones. Now, I had some issues with it because the 3D printer I have can only print 4 colors. Well, I could do 5 if I really wanted to be creative, but I could only do 4 colors. So that means that any of the extra shadow that Imagen had added along the edges here, and I think it had added some cheeks in here. Well, I only had 1 color red. I'm trying to avoid having 50 different colors of filament in my room. So I only had 1 color red, and I have the black and I had the white. So I had to cut it down, and I used the editing feature inside of Vertex Studio's AI thing there. So I could just color off, I want you to remove the shading here, and it would just poof, it was gone. And I was like, okay, can you add a couple of little, add some whites to the eyes so that it gave it like that little cute little pop. And it was really quick. I mean, I think I had a flat JPEG file in 20 minutes.
No, one of the things that I found that's really nice is that the editing is really quick and works relatively well.
And the thing is it gives you 4 versions, I think, of
yeah.
it. Yeah. So I was able to pick which one I wanted, and then I could edit further onto it and remove more and more. And I think there was some kind of a weird thing going on with the side at one point, and I had it, close it better and make it more round and even shaped. And it was great. Like I said, within 30 minutes, I had something that I could take over to Bamboo Studios keychain maker, and then it automatically turns it into an STL file, and I could just pick which colors I wanted, which sections to be, and that was it. I had a 3D printed thing.
One of the things that I think was pretty awesome about your experience with that is that you're able to just say, hey, this part there, just tweak that. Yeah. I had the same thing when I had it generating a thumbnail a few weeks back. It came up with this nice one, but it had these wires that were just like running in weird ways. I'm like, I used the select tool in Vertex AI Studio. It's actually a really, really intuitive setup. It's kind of, you select it and you give it a prompt about what you want it to do. And if you don't give it a prompt, it assumes that means remove this. So I just highlighted the wires, said generate. It gave me 4 of them. A couple of them look good. I picked the best one. That's now my new image. And, I look at it and I said, well, now I'd highlight the wristwatch. And I'd say, remove that. And it does that. just really, really flexible and intuitive, and it really felt easy to use.
It was also nice because I was able to take existing files.
Yes.
My daughter wanted a bookmark. She wanted me to 3D print her a bookmark. Now, we found this one online, but there were some issues with, we didn't like the infill on some of the leaves and stuff. So I took it into Vertex again, to Imagen again, and I was like, well, edit this and change this slightly. And then we were able to create one that was more us, and then still 3D print. Again, we could 3D print
Yeah.
it.
Now, Vertex AI Studio is cool, but one of the cool things about it, though, is that behind it is an API, which we could use. You know, so really, what you're basically doing with that, you know, what their tool does with the drawing and so forth, is creating an image mask. And if you've done any work at all with images, you know that's just basically a black or white image that says, this is the part I care about, this is the part I don't. So by creating that mask, you give it the mask, you give it the original image, it does the magic of saying, okay, this tells me what I need to pay attention to, and applies whatever prompt you want just to that part. So if you wanted to, if you had a particular pipeline of, you're taking an image and you need to always edit it in this way, or you wanted to integrate it with your own existing user interface, or if you wanted to build a GIMP plugin or something, you can do so.
One of the things that I've played with previously is the fact that Gemini itself can actually find something in an image. They can, if there's like the plant in the corner here.
Yes.
You could say find the plant, and it will return to you the actual points for the mask. So you can actually draw a box. I've tested with it before. So I've actually thought that I can feed the image first to Gemini and say, find the plant. And then once it finds the plant, it will return to you a mask that you can then use in the image editing in Imagen. So you're using both systems together to do your editing. So if anybody's wondering how you get the mask programmatically, you can use Gemini to get your mask programmatically and then feed it to the Imagen editing system.
Right, you can do that. There are also other ways, there are existing technologies for doing this. So for example, if you wanted to change my shirt into a different color, you can use existing tools to identify color ranges, turn that into a mask, and say, change that red.
Yeah.
So lots of stuff that we can do with that, which is all really pretty exciting. But wait, there's more. One of the kind of interesting things that I keep thinking about with all of this is, some of this is fun. It's fun for me to, take an image and easily edit it because I am not good at editing images. But I feel like one of the real goals for this kind of technology is to say, okay, if I have a product, if I'm a product manager, I've now got a great picture of my product, but I want to put it in a different light. How do I do that? So one of the things that they have, what they call generating images with reference images, and it's pretty impressive. So for example, I took a picture of this felt donut.
Mm-hmm.
I said, use this as a reference image for a donut, and now give me a picture with a donut on a fancy china plate next to a steaming cup of tea. And it put this donut on a china plate next to a steaming cup of tea. And it's kind of weird, it's kind of amazing how easy that is, again, using Vertex AI Studio. Let me show that. This is an example of, in the prompt, I can just say a donut on a fancy china plate, and I'm referencing a specific something here. I can bring up that reference, and that's just, I've uploaded a file. And that's really all there is to it. I mean, you can give it a description, but it's not used for anything. You give it a reference type, and that's used a little bit for some reference info. And you can see here again, I had to give 4 images, 2 of which I don't know how it came up with. Those aren't very good. Two of which are really good. One of which is very much the donut itself. You know, you can
Yep.
tell that it's a fabric donut. The other one is kind of interesting. That almost looks like it's a real donut with this fabric on top of
Yeah,
it.
it looks like it's knitted.
Right. I mean, it is.
Or crocheted.
Right. I mean, it is. I mean, that's what the original is.
Yeah.
So one of the things kind of to keep in mind when doing this is you're using generative AI.
Yes.
It's not doing image overlays. It's doing, whatever magic it does to extract information out of these objects.
One of the things that I've wondered whether or not you could do, and you might actually be able to tell me if you could, is if you have a system. I mean, there are a lot of systems out there that a lot of companies have that generate reports for management, right? So if management has this report, could you then use Imagen or to generate PowerPoint slides based upon the report? Could it take the report and create background slides and images to go along with the report data?
Probably, maybe, but
Maybe.
But here's the thing: if what you're looking for are charts, it's not going to generate charts.
Well, I'm wondering if it would take. I mean,
But
you could yourself take the chart and add the chart to it, but to get an image of, I don't know, somebody looking at a screen or something like that, and then place your chart into it.
Sure, but even better, let's look at another example using this. Let's remove the references. Let's add a new reference of a person, and we're going to add this picture of me.
Oh no.
This was just me from, this is a headshot that someone did of me a few months back, which was pretty good, so I kept it around. We can now say a person number one, looking at a financial report projected on the screen, and I trimmed out because you didn't need to see it waiting. So some of these aren't too bad.
But you're not looking at it, you're in front of it.
I'm not looking at it, I'm looking in front of it, but that's, most of the image of me got correct.
Yeah.
Maybe if we changed it to something like reading a financial report or something like that, we would get a picture of me, holding up a piece of paper looking at it. But kind of the idea, and this really, it's far from perfect.
But I wonder if for example, again, going back to the idea of the PowerPoint slides, if a company had a model that they wanted to use in all of their slides, they
Right.
could then use that person in every single one of them.
Use that person in every single one. Right.
Yeah.
Or, put their CEO so that they're staring at a set of blueprints in a place that they've never actually been, or there's some ethical issues here.
Yeah, the ethical ramifications of this are really bad. But anyways, it'd be really cool if you could do it.
But this kind of gives you and I feel like the intent of this is so that you can do exactly what you've done, is say, I'm going to hire a model to act out in a bunch of poses. Let me take that model's picture and put them into scenarios so that it looks so that it looks right. So we don't need to use stock images of people that don't work here. And
this is actually something that a lot of people do. If you sell, for example, if you make your own products, like 3D printed items, if you sell them on Etsy, for example, then it's very common not to just take the picture yourself sitting on your desk. You can actually take, for example, if you make a painting or something, and superimpose it onto stock backgrounds of people's living rooms with a couch and all that.
Right.
You could actually do that with Imagen.
Right.
Because you can edit it, you can insert this new image of your product and then have it superimpose it on top.
Right. So, for example, you're allowed to have, currently in this version, you're allowed to have 2 references. I think in the final version, they've talked about having up to 4. You can say things like, a person, 1, wearing a necklace, 2. or
There you
a
go.
person, 1, wearing a shirt, 2.
But I think this is going to be amazing for people for like people selling things, because the pricing on it isn't that bad for the everyday person.
So yes, having the ability to take a product and insert it into another scene, really powerful stuff. And again, it's part of the API. So, you can, if
You can automate it,
right,
which will be absolutely amazing.
incredible stuff. So the third thing I wanted to talk about was a feature called outpainting. And
Oh yes.
you've kind of seen this in a lot where, it'll take an image and then it'll kind of zoom out to show what's surrounding it. And, when I saw outpainting, I'm like, oh, I could write a program that does that. That's pretty straightforward, actually. Outpainting conceptually is, again, it's an API, it's easy to do. So like we've talked about before, you're going to give it 2 images. Your actual image that you're going to want to enlarge, and the mask. Now the catch here is that the image and the mask need to be the same dimensions. So if you're outpainting, what you really want is you want an original image that is smaller than the whole thing, with masking to indicate what the rest of it is going to be, and then you want another mask to says, here's where you're drawing. It sounds a little complicated. It really is not as bad as it sounds. One of the neat things about this is kind of intended if you've got like a portrait and you want to turn it into a landscape. What does that top and bottom look like? Instead of just putting in blurred stuff, hypothesize what it might be, or vice versa. But I decided to use it for outpainting. And then I said, well, okay, once you do that once, what happens when you do it again and again? And you keep doing that, say, 100 times. What does it look like? So I wrote a little program to do that, of course.
I knew you had. I actually tested outpainting because I have an amazing picture from my wedding. It's my husband and I and my mother-in-law standing between us. My mother-in-law died a year ago, so it's one of the best pictures we have of her. But unfortunately, my daughter took the picture and she cut the top of my husband's head off.
Yeah.
So I used Imagen to give him a top of his head. So it works great for the this single thing works.
It works remarkably well. So here's the program that does it, and I'm not going to go through this program line by line, but you should
put it up on GitHub.
I will put this up on GitHub, although I'm not sure it's that good.
Doesn't have to
I will put this up on GitHub, and I'll include a link.
Try and recreate it in Python. I'll parse it to Python this weekend for you.
But kind of the neat image, the neat bits about it is that the call itself is pretty straightforward. You're just giving it an image and a mask, and you're giving it a couple of configurations, and it's giving a result. And in this case, I just have it giving me one result because I wanted to automate this. So we started with this picture, a decent enough picture, and tell it to zoom out a bit, and it did a pretty good job. And as we're zooming out, it's doing okay. This actually it is not quite what the actual buildings look like, but it was close enough. But then we started seeing some interesting artifacts.
It's a rainbow on the right.
Kind of,
how
yeah.
Nice.
But the artifacts just kept getting bigger and bigger, and then suddenly we get some serious top and bottom artifacts.
Yeah, this is what happened when I did it over on Canva as well, is it starts getting confused.
Now, what I find cool is that, okay, it almost looks like it turned that into a frame.
I'd love to know what it's thinking.
In some of the runs, oh look, we now have like a plant emerging.
Cool.
So like it started treating this as a picture frame sitting on a shelf. and just started
Oh,
hallucinating.
that's amazing, Alan.
Now
You
some
should
of the ones that,
almost turn that into a video.
well, that's kind of my hope. My goal was to do that. But, this is pretty cool. I mean, I don't know what this thing on the right is, but some of the ones that I did, it looked like it turned it into a picture on a wall, and then it started hallucinating other pictures on the same wall.
What's the thing on the left? It looks like part of a Christmas tree or some
It
kind of a weird cake.
it does look like that, but then it degenerates even further, and it keeps degenerating at this point.
It turns into.
So that's 43 frames in. We skip
How
another.
far did you go it?
I went
Oh
100.
no!
You
All
know,
right.
so there was there's 65. It's just clearly on a downward trend here. There it is at 75. Uh,
Have you sent this to the team?
I don't know if I have actually.
I think you should, because I think they'd be fascinated. I'd love to know at what point it goes wrong and why it goes wrong.
Well, I feel like it starts if we go back and
This
look
could be
at
some
it.
this could be in the Smithsonian for modern art, because that's just that's amazing. I love that.
So if we looked at it, the first 4 frames were great.
It
The
almost looks
fifth,
like it fish eyes on itself
yeah,
somehow,
the
and then
fifth
that's
one,
when.
the fifth one started getting some hallucinations, but it isn't until the 7th frame that it really just starts. It gives the top and bottom bars that are just weird,
I got
and it goes
exactly
downhill
the
from there.
same thing from Canva. When I did that, I tried to do it with a watercolor image, and I actually started getting these weird symbols. You know, the symbols on the bottoms of American checks? They're
Yeah,
not really numbers. They're more like these weird symbols.
well, they are
I was
numbers.
getting those, and I don't know where they were coming from. And at one of them, I actually started getting the weird numbers you used to get in the if you took a not a picture. Do you remember the old slides?
Yes.
My dad had a slide projector thing. You remember the things you used to get around the sides of those? I
Yeah.
was getting those at one point as well, and I don't know why.
Huh. That's interesting. I'm willing to bet that some of that is because the images it was trained on had that.
They must have.
And that's actually a fairly common effect for a while, was to put fake ones of those in.
Nice.
So, it seems like every 10, 5 or 10 of these iterations, it just flakes out on the border suddenly. So I'm wondering, I don't know, where that degeneration comes from, but it's interesting.
I think you should send it to the team and just let them garble through it, because I think there's got to be somebody on the team that would just love to go through that.
So this was doing it for an interesting effect in an experiment. But the concept underneath it kind of shows that you can zoom out a little to get a perspective of what it thinks, what it hallucinates is surrounding whatever it's being shown.
Yeah, because to be clear, an AI image generator is not actually seeing what we see when it generates these images.
No, this
They
is
don't have, it doesn't have the concept of true human
no.
vision.
These are just like everything else. These are patterns. It's building these based on other patterns. So in that hallucination case, something about it is triggering a degenerate, to hallucinate that pattern. And I'm amused by that in this particular case. But
Yeah,
yeah, but again, there's an API underneath all of that,
yeah.
which means that if you are doing things like you're taking a square image and you need to turn it into a landscape, or you want to turn it into something shown on a phone, you can use this, and it does it not very quickly, but quickly enough for some use cases. So 3 different parts of this API, giving us as developers brand new powers of what we can do. And again, behind it all, you also have Vertex AI Studio that you can go and play with it.
I use it almost daily, so yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I use it almost daily as well. It is definitely, it's become a crucial part of how I create thumbnails for my YouTube videos these days. And even if I'm taking, a regular photo, I will use it to modify that photo. I don't need to generate and edit. I will take a photo and edit. And I think it's a really powerful way to do editing.
Yeah.
So this is exciting. I mean, we see it's not perfect. The technology is not quite there. But
I mean, you got to remember, we got access to a version of Imagen in July of last year.
sounds right.
Yeah. And it was okay.
It was, yeah.
It was confused quite often. It was occasionally not safe for work.
We discussed that last time.
Yeah, we discussed that last time.
It occasionally plagiarized a lot.
Oh, a lot. And in under a year, it's so much better now than it was before. I mean, it is so useful. I like it.
I think what's important to think about with this one, there's been a lot of criticism about all of these generative models, about how they are plagiarizing from creatives. And it's a legitimate criticism,
Yes.
and we discussed it a lot last time.
Yes.
I think what this also shows is that people who are creative can take their own work and use the tools to help adjust them.
Yes.
So you can use your work to, take that art that you created and put it in different environments. Put it in photorealistic settings if you're not a photographer. If you are a photographer, take it and turn your photographs into other styles. So I feel like this is, I don't feel like this makes up for what's being done to creatives, not by a long shot.
No.
But I think this is another tool that artists can use to help create their artwork. And I think it's certainly a tool that they should be looking at.
I mean, the thing is I consider myself a very creative person. I have a 3D printer, and I would love to be able to create things. But I do not have time to sit down and learn how to use Fusion 360 and become an expert in Inkscape. I'm sorry, I just don't have the time for that right now. But I can do this and do the same thing.
Well, but I think also it's important to say that, if you are an artist, if you are great at illustrating,
Yes.
this is another tool for your tool chest, just like, digitizing stuff was a tool that, it took people time to learn. This is another tool. And I think that's important for people to kind of learn the different tools that are out there and explore how they can take advantage of them.
It's a tool. Just like I mean, spell check and grammar check are, in my opinion. Yeah.
So Linda, this has been fantastic. This was really fun.
Yeah, it's been great. Do it again sometime.
We need to do this again sometime. I have a funny feeling we'll be doing this again with Imagen 4. Just a funny feeling.
Yeah, just a funny feeling. Probably.
And, who knows what's going to be coming out. Who knows? Maybe we'll do this when we talk about videos.
Never know.
Never know. But I am sure we will talk about it when we can.
Yep.
On Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.
Take care.
Bye.